And now that I am newly divorced,
I was kind of wondering. I'm not gonna lie. I wasn't gonna ask though. I was not gonna ask.
but you could, of course, you could ask. Now that I'm newly divorced,
I'm not Wendy Williams. I'm not gonna put nobody on the spot, make you mad at me.
But see,
okay.
you know, I mean, people who are purpose chasers, that's what I call my community, who listen to the podcast, I have used my divorce to still be a lesson, and I'm really open about the takeaways and the growth, because to me, nothing happens to you, it happens for you. And I believe that we just have to embrace when a season is complete. It doesn't have to be bad. It doesn't have to be ugly. I determined from the beginning I'm going to divorce with dignity. And so the pillars that I teach from at Redefining Wealth, that is what has literally helped me get through this season with ease and grace. Not that it's easy, but I think that your attitude towards a process will determine how you make progress, right? And my attitude was, I will do this with dignity.
Yes.
And we have. Yeah. So this is a new season for me. I call this season Scaling Joy. That's going to be my next book.
Guys, this was not on my list of topics.
Oh, you had all kind of questions.
Okay, yes, the question, but we're going to have to take a little detour. Okay, so I do, first of all, just appreciate your honesty, your transparency. Because like I said, I wasn't gonna ask you, but I do remember when when you got the Claire Huxtable Award, you were very honest, you were very transparent, you told us your business, and you did it from a place of teaching from your lessons learned.
Always.
And I think that is one of the best things that you can do, is being vulnerable. It's sharing. It's literally not just learning the lessons and being selfish, but sharing them with other people so that I can learn, from the things that you've gone through. So being newly divorced, this show, like I mentioned, is all about helping women make the money and get the honey. So many women out there are single. They're in their single season. They're in their searching season, whether they're searching for themselves, searching for a mate, searching for completion, whatever. What would you say is like your biggest lesson that you're taking from your divorce? Because this isn't the end of the road, right? This is just you on a new path. So look at her face. Should I ask the next question?
No, this is not the end of the road.
You came in here with the shoulder out. I'm like, what's the next path you're going down? But what would you say you're like walking away knowing now that you didn't necessarily know before that can help somebody else?
That the most important thing is loving yourself fully and completely. I got married when I was 26. I started dating my husband about 21, 22. And, some of the stories that I tell are just knowing that back then, I didn't grow up feeling beautiful, right? I was not known as the pretty one. I was the smart one. I couldn't look in the mirror without cringing until I was 25 years old, because I always wished I looked like someone else. I'm the kid that used to scrub her skin in the tub wishing I was lighter, because I had other people in my family who were lighter, and people always called me the darkie, the blackie, the this, the that.
That's
right?
so crazy to me.
Yeah, but it happens. And I know people are in the audience like, girl, that's me. That's what they do, right? And so I didn't have the best perception of self. I knew I was smart and I just leaned into achievement, but I was grateful, right? And that's not to take away from him, but it's also to acknowledge that at 22, 23 years old, I was like, oh, wow, someone loves me. And we were best friends. And so that evolved. But almost 20 years later, I'm a different woman. I have done 20 years
shit now, baby.
Personal development.
Yes.
Well, but it's not even the achievements anymore. It's the personal development. It's the therapy. It's the healing childhood trauma. It's the learning to forgive people who will never say I'm sorry. It's the being able to look at myself and be like, God made no mistakes in creating me. Like, I'm exactly who I'm supposed to be. It's looking at what I do every day and seeing that, like, your life has purpose. You were born with purpose, on purpose, for purpose. Like, you are called to impact other people. And then when I see my clients and I see what, like, I can create, even in all my flaws and imperfections, there is great things to be done. You start to love yourself on a different level. Like, you know what? I actually am really awesome, but also I'm allowed to evolve and to think that you should entertain and tolerate and be okay with things that you were okay with 18 years ago is crazy. That's wild, right? And I just got to this point, especially when I turned 40 in 2021. my life coach had me do an exercise. She said, do the willing to lose list. I'm like, what is the willing to lose? She said, it's not that you want to lose it, but you're willing to lose people, places, things, like, whatever, in order to be all that you believe God has called you to be. And I had to be radically honest. See, a lot of times we don't want to get on that list. I didn't at first because I didn't want to see it. So I didn't. But when she first explained the exercise,
you knew it.
It kind of dropped in my spirit, but I didn't want, of course, nobody gets married wanting to get divorced. Nobody gets married thinking that. I was envisioning picking up grandkids with this man one day, like doing all the things. We going to the tape. We dying like Notebook, like together, holding hands. I had never envisioned it. But I had to be radically honest and ask myself a lot of questions about, are you really fulfilled? And do you actually feel like you're being loved the way that you now love yourself? And the answer was no. And he had learned to love me in brokenness, but didn't understand who I was as a more whole and complete woman. The type of love you gave me 10 years ago is not going to sustain who I am today. And I had to be honest about that. And I was honest. And if someone doesn't have the capacity to love you how you want to be loved, I think for me, I had to choose to love myself more than anyone and anything. And in loving myself to that extent, I couldn't settle for love that didn't serve me.
What was the conversation with your daughter like? Because Mini Maven is not Minnie anymore.
Now.
Jesus. Yes, she is a whole little grown becoming a little grown woman. And you can't just make a decision like that, make a life change like that the same way you could if she was 5.
Correct.
So what were the conversations like? Because I think that's so important. Again, allowing her to learn through your lessons, but then also letting her keep that safe space with her daddy. So what were those conversations like?
It's so funny because he and I just talked about this on this past Sunday. We were talking about how blessed we are to have a daughter that can hold space for both of us. No matter what, she can love her mom and she can love her dad and respect us both. We don't talk ill of each other. Definitely not around her, but we're honest.
Definitely not around her.
Definitely not around her, but we're honest about what we each need. And she gets to respect that it's okay. Like, it's okay for people to know what they need and accept that they're not getting it from their partner. Like, has nothing to do with her and our love for her. But I remember her telling me early on when we first separated, she's like, I think you and dad are going to be great co-parents. And I was like, you think so? And she was like, yeah, like, you guys are going to be great co-parents. Like, the whole time, I think because we approached it from, we're going to do this with dignity, she's just seen it as a process and not a problem. It's just kind of like, okay, this is what's happening. It's not to say she hasn't had her moments, right? And she has a small group at church that has supported her a lot and all those things. But she's been very accepting and very, like, she told me one day, Mom, like, I love seeing you so happy.
She can see it.
So in love. And I did not think I was unhappy. If you would have asked me a few years ago, I would have never said, oh, I'm unhappy in my marriage. That wasn't it. But when I started to think about where my life could go and what it could be if I was loved the way I wanted to be loved, I had to be honest. And so it wasn't that it was terrible, he was an awful guy, and we were just fighting it. We weren't doing any of those things. But there was an awakening for me, and I had to be honest about it.
Was he shocked? Since it wasn't, like, it was always a problem. Or did he kind of see it coming?
He would say that he was shocked, but I don't think he really was. I don't think anyone wants to say I knew it was coming. We had conversations, and I'm very open, and I'm very clear. I'm a clear communicator, right? So it's not that I hadn't voiced certain things. I literally just don't believe he had the capacity. That's different than desire. I believe that he had the desire and not necessarily the capacity in the time frame that I was working with. And I had to just say, there's no prize in saying, I was married for 40 years, but 25 of them I was unhappy. For
Facts.
What?
Facts.
And that's what many of our mothers and grandmothers and great-grandmothers did. We don't live in that time anymore, right? So I have a right to be happy. And I want to be happy and, like, fully express all of who I am all of the time. And so we had conversations. He still has said, that he felt blindsided. And of course that's to be expected, right? And a part of like a big lesson that I've learned is I owe him the dignity of his own process. When we first separated, because I wanted it to be so, amicable, I was like, we're going to talk every week and we're going to flush out everything. We're not going to waste all our money on all these attorneys. People were like, it's going to take you 3 years with all the stuff you got. I was like, I do not receive that. We're going to do this with grace. We're going to do this amicably. And he went along with it. But I realized after several months that in his mind, he still thought there was a chance. He was being nice because he's like, oh, if I do what she says,
we'll just
like,
get back together.
we're going to get back together. And in my head, I was like really clear that was not an option. And we had some difficult conversations, and I had to just apologize just recently. I'm like, I was not trying to intentionally control anything, but I realized by carrying on that way and just like, hey, we're going to talk every week and we're going to do this and it's going to look like that I was being controlling, not from a like fear-based place, but it was control nonetheless. And it wasn't fair because he needed to grieve, and a part of his grief may have included not seeing her talking to me.
Cut.
A true right? And so that was a big lesson. Like, give people the dignity of their process. Like, you can still do something with dignity and allow it to be difficult. Having dignity doesn't mean it's just going to be perfect. Yeah.
So you dating? Can I ask you that?
Yeah. With intention.
I knew she was dating. I knew it because she was like, yes, not the end of the road, baby. I felt that.
Yeah.
I felt that in my spirit.
I talked about it on the podcast that I was going to date with intention. So earlier this year, I'm on a flight. I had a brand gig in New York and I was flying to speak in San Antonio. And I'm on the flight and I literally have this like, again, that like still small voice that's like nudging. It's like, you're not even clear on what you want. Do you even really know what you want? And you can list a few things like honest, kind, right? And so I take my phone out, open up the notes, and my spirit is like, write everything that you want and don't hold back. And I get down to like 7 things and I'm like, I remember reading an article where they were like, women are too picky and they just need to have 3 things and let God fill in the rest. And then my spirit was like, they were not talking to you, ma'am. Your spirit said, write it all. The list was like 29 things. 29 things. And every day, like not every day, but I would say a couple times a week, I just kind of review it because I started to have an awareness. This is the thing. I was heads down, faithful, like all the thing for 14 and a half years, right? So I didn't even know when men were flirting with me because I used to just always be like, oh, thank you. They'd be like, oh, you're beautiful. Thank you so much. I never really looked around, paid attention, none of that. So having the list allowed me to start having more awareness around men, right? And then I could meet people and all of a sudden, like I would notice like, oh, someone's flirting with me and I would talk to them and then I go, oh,
that ain't it. No,
not you. Like I remember one thing on the list code was like, I want someone that's humorous, right? And I met a guy. He seemed really cool. I'm talking to him, and then I realized he has mean-spirited humor. So his humor is at the expense of other people. I don't really like that. As someone who was bullied, as a kid and all that, when it was teasing, but it was nasty. I'm like, I really don't like mean-spirited humor. So I had to like update the list. I was like, humor,
let me get
not
specific.
mean-spirited.
Yeah, let me get specific.
So that was a really good exercise for me in this season. Just like, okay, what do you want? I will say this. I learned that there's not a shortage of men.
Tell them. Look in that camera right there and say that one more time.
I have really learned that there's not a shortage of men.